what I love about that space is one, there's typically a desire across the board to be more sustainable. There's a lot of value that we can bring because, as you know, the packaging world is kind of filled with
Yeah.
potholes and speed bumps and
Yeah.
down trees just because the winds are horrible out here in California. Like, and so having people that have been through the journey a lot, they can kind of navigate around those and then provide other insights and ways to improve the packaging supply chain for businesses is just something we really enjoy doing and that I think we're pretty good at.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's segment right here on the Product and Packaging Powerhouse. I am your show host and curator, Megan Young Gamble, Chief Project Officer at GLC, your packaging and project execution team. And guys, I'm so excited to be kicking off today's segment with a special guest. And also, if you checked out some of our other podcasts, my husband's name is Brandon. Our powerhouse for today is not my husband, but he has the same name as my husband, which is Mr. Brandon Frank, who is the owner of PPC, which is Pacific Packaging Components based in California. And guys, let me just share a little bit about what we're going to get into for today. And y'all know if you've been rocking with me for a while, welcome back to the house. You know, our conversations are very raw, authentic, and we always are bringing the insight of what's happening in the industry. So, my conversation with today's powerhouse guest, Mr. Brandon Frank, is going to be centered around packaging, technology, and sustainability. And Mr. Frank is passionate about all three of those. And so, as we're going to be kicking off, make sure you do hit that subscribe button and those follow buttons on your respective platforms via audio and also video platforms because we do not want you to miss an episode. And then also make sure you scroll down to the show notes so you can make sure to connect with Brandon as well because you definitely want to going to connect with him after this conversation for today. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome powerhouse guest Brandon Frank. So, Brandon, welcome to the house.
Thank you so much. And Megan, that was probably the best introduction I've ever gotten in my life. So thank you for that. If I could just have that everywhere I go, that would be amazing.
Hey,
Thank you.
well, you know what? You can take this snippet and then take it with you. How about that?
That sounds good.
So awesome. Well, I'm so excited to be here with you and to have this authentic conversation with you today. And so, before we get into the meat and potatoes, we always have to start with the appetizer, which is introduction. So, no time like the president, nobody can ever speak about themselves like the powerhouse. So, I would love for you to share a little bit about yourself, how you and became the owner of Package Pacific Packaging Components and how you came into the packaging industry.
Yeah, well, it's a fascinating story that's kind of filled with a lot of like drama and twists and turns because PPC was actually founded 54, almost 55 years ago by my grandparents. And it was the first packaging distributor in Southern California. And they basically just recognized that there was a business need in the area because businesses were having a hard time finding really good packaging manufacturers and suppliers, and manufacturers were having a really hard time finding customers. And so they kind of created PPC. And I swear it would make an amazing TV series or book, and maybe someday we'll kind of document the story of it. But my dad and mom, right before I was born, when they got married, he joined the family business. So I was literally born into the packaging space. I remember very early on going through aisles with my dad, try to find broken packaging because
Oh,
there
wow.
wasn't like internet searches or something. So we would go to the grocery stores or whatever and find packaging that was either leaking or paneling or that maybe the design was off or whatever. And then he would pull out a pad of paper and write down the company's information and then he would reach out to him and be like, hey, you've got some packaging problems over at, Target or Walmart, whatever. And, let's see if I can help out. So, and then I just grew up like Thanksgiving meals, dinner time conversations. Like there was always packaging issues or problems. And when I needed a summer job, when I was kind of in high school, I would start working in the warehouse. And so I was, unloading containers and working in the
Wow.
warehouse and learning how to drive the forklift and knocking over a lot of pallets and boxes. And actually, one of the very first days I was in the warehouse, I was turning a corner and I had triple stacked it, which you're not supposed to do. But I took it a little too fast and the pallets literally just like tipped over and fell the top two. And the warehouseman just came over and he put his hand on his shoulder. He goes, if you weren't family, you'd be fired. All right, that's a good start to the day. So yeah, so it's been a family business. It stayed in the family the whole time. My grandmother owned it until she was 98, 95, when she
Wow.
passed away. And then my parents basically took over ownership from her for just a little bit, and then they were kind of ready to retire and had some health issues. And so I kind of stepped in, and I was already running the business. So I came back to the business about 7 years ago, took over as president, and then just last year basically took over from my parents, and I'm now the owner. So
Wow.
yeah.
That's such an amazing story. And that's legacy too, and shout out to your grandparents for recognizing the need, especially in Southern California. And there was no packaging distributor, but yet everything needs packaging in some form of fashion. So for them to be very progressive and forward thinking is phenomenal. And here PPC is 50 years later, and you running the company and growing it and working with various industries and phenomenal brands out there too, like is a testament to the evolution of the company. So shout out to y'all. That's
Thank you.
amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's again, it's as anyone that's worked with a lot of family members or in a family business, it adds a layer of kind of depth
Yeah.
and complexity and emotionalism and just a lot of other factors that I think don't really exist when it's you don't have family kind of actively involved and things. But
Yeah.
still to this day, my mom is still on the board. My dad passed away last year, and kind of family's recovering from that. And but my brother Nolan is still actively in the business too. And so yeah, and then the company and different leaders over the years, like it's been kind of challenging to maintain like the culture and values, and so that's always kind of a struggle as well. But when I took over, yeah, I guess kind of running the company, sustainability was a passion of mine starting back when I was in college, because I was the recycling guy on campus.
Oh
So
wow.
I would drive this. I was on financial aid and needed to work and put myself through school. So I would drive this like red Toyota Tacoma around campus to all the different dorms, and I'd pick up the recycling.
Oh
And there was
wow.
like the glass bin and the plastic bin and the paper bin and the car, like all these bins. And so I'd go through and collect, and they were always putting the containers in the wrong items. So I was always creating signage to try to improve the ways that it was collected. And then I was delivering the recycling even in the middle of winter in St. Louis, which is where I went to school.
Wow.
The tires had no tread, so I was like drifting around corners around campus and barely making it. But yeah, then I would drop it off at the school collection place where like there was waste and then there was all the recycling stuff. And it wasn't until my senior year where I was like a little curious, like, where does this stuff go? Like, can I see where it goes? And that's when I learned that almost none of the items that I had been collecting were actually getting recycled.
Really?
Really? And it was like, wait a second, what? And so then the economics of recycling, that whole thing, I started to learn more about that. And so that put kind of that like initial seed of kind of that needed to grow, of this recycling thing is confusing and complex and broken in a lot of ways. And the way we're even talking about it is, almost intentionally misleading people into thinking that it's better than what it actually is.
Mm.
So anyways, and then when I came back, I started bringing up the topic of sustainability. And as a legacy business, packaging business that's been around for decades, the family response was like, oh yeah, sustainability, like, the people care about it for like 3 minutes, and then things just go back to the way it is. And I was like, I don't know, like I think this is going to be something that isn't going to be a fad. Like I think the levee's broken. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's time for like real change and real transparency. And sure enough, I mean, 6 years later, the way that the packaging supply chain or value chain and all the members involved in it, the shifts that have happened have been so significant. even, I mean, if you take just one aspect of it, like the supply of recycled plastic, six,
Yeah.
7 years ago, we would go into the market looking for recycled plastic to make anything in plastic.
Yeah.
And it was like, yeah, you can, but you'd have to make 2 million of them, or you'd have to, you'd have to be a certain stock format or be very limited options. Now, anything made in plastic, PET, polypropylene, polyethylene, even ABS has recycled content that's available for lots of different types of packaging, formats. So, and that
Yeah.
happened in a relatively short amount of time.
It did. And you brought up a couple points that I want to hit on because as we talk about transparency and how recycling is misleading, so everybody knows, if you've been rocking with me, I live in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm a Southerner to my core. Grew up in Arkansas, okay, Little Rock, Arkansas. And so St. Louis, Arkansas, Texas, Louisiana, that whole area, recycling was never really talked about. And you only knew about recycling when you would see people go around, collect the cans, and try to redeem it for a cash value and such. But here in Georgia, we have recycling bins, but in my municipality, which is outside of Metro Atlanta, we recycle totally different in Cobb County. That's the county I live in, versus Gwinnett County versus City of Atlanta.
Hmm.
And so, to your point, it's very misleading. And I always tell people we don't have the right infrastructure in place from a recycling standpoint. And when here in Metro Atlanta, when you have six major counties and all six counties are doing something totally different and the infrastructure is not in place, but yet you're telling us that we need to recycle, but we don't even have recycling bins at some major facilities. Like Mercedes Benz just got one because they're sustainability certified certifications and stuff. But State Farm Arena, don't where the Hawks play, we don't have recycling bins.
Hmm.
So to that point, it's like a very disconnect and it's very misleading, especially from a consumer standpoint, to know should we recycle, should we not recycle? But then the brands we're purchasing from, should we recycle this because it says recycle or has the chasing arrows or the Morbius loop, or should we not? And how do we know if it's actually getting recycled? So it's big conversation, but my ultimate thing is we don't have the right infrastructure in place and there is no consistency with the communications around that. So I had to hit on that because I talk about it in some of my other episodes too. But to your point, it's very misleading. And so I have a question for you based upon misleading around recycling and sustainability as a whole. Excuse me, which is how what do you think needs to be in place to help make sure that the communication is consistent and not be misleading for consumers and also industry experts alike?
Yeah, I mean, that is a huge question. And you're right. Like, this is like, it's a really complex problem. For me, at least the way that I think about it is that any problem that kind of overarches or is a part of the entire kind of value chain needs to be addressed kind of holistically. So
Yeah.
basically, you need to have collaboration and communication across the entire packaging value chain. So that's from raw material suppliers to packaging manufacturers to brands to consumers to the recyclers to the you know processors, like all of the different people that are in it need to have a say in how we're talking about this topic. So typically what happened really early on, and I can't remember which year it was, but it was, maybe you can help me remember, but there was it was kind of the first time where plastic packaging, it became really popular, and then there was this big concern about the amount of plastic waste that was being generated.
Yep.
And then there was an ad campaign created by the plastic industry and by the beverage industry. It was kind of right around the same time when the beverage industry kind of moved away from glass into PET plastic. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, wait, like where is all this stuff going?
Yep.
And there was an ad that was kind of this, I think it was like a Native American, and he was kind of crying because it was like there was a tear that fell down his cheek, and all of this plastic waste was all around him. And the message was, it's up to you, the consumer, to recycle. So it was this
Mm.
big marketing push to move the responsibility away from the plastic producers and the beverage companies to the public, that this was your problem to solve. And all you had to do was toss that item into the bin, and then everything would be fine because we could recycle
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So
That's
what
true.
that did is it kind of like segmented the responsibility, right? Like whenever there's a solution that's needed and everyone's kind of starting to segment into their corners, everyone backs up into their corners and be like, no, it's your responsibility. It's yours.
Yeah.
There's no solution that's going to happen. And in that environment, what ended up happening was there just became these terms that were used kind of synonymously, but without really clear feedback or understanding from other people. So the best example of this is recyclable. So
Hmm.
recyclable and monomaterial became synonymous in the packaging industry. So if
Yeah.
it was one, so in order to recycle anything, it's got to be one material. So it's got to be all PET, all polyethylene, all metals or aluminums. That's a little different because you can kind of separate them out. But and so this whole thing of like making things monomaterial. So if it was all plastic in one thing, then you could call it recyclable, and then you could tell the public that this item is recyclable. You could put the chasing arrows as a whole other story, the chasing arrow story, like where that came from. But so it was all an attempt to make plastics seem more environmentally friendly from a waste standpoint. And
Hmm.
in actuality, when you talk to the recycling industry, it was like, no, like really only clear PET and natural high density polyethylene, like basically like milk jugs, were actually going to be recycled because that was the only material that kind of had a demand for it after the recycling process. But even then, it would have to be incredibly pure and really clean in order for anyone to want to buy it and use it again, right? So the
Hmm.
so the economics of the recycling thing is really really interesting too. And so at the end of the day, most of this was just being collected from in a recycle bin and then just being transported to a landfill.
Yeah.
And that's still what's happening a lot of
Still
today.
happening.
Almost
Yeah.
everything that goes to the recycling facility for sorting ends up not actually going and being recycled in large parts of the country. And to your point, it's really every city, every state, every municipality has different standards and even availability for recycling certain items. Glass is infinitely recyclable, but it's really hard to process and transport because it's heavy. So if you
Yes,
don't
it
have a
is.
glass recycling facility close by, like
What do you do?
what do you do? Like where do you go? Like
Yeah.
becomes really difficult. So
Yeah, and ladies and gentlemen, Brandon is so, as you can hear from his story, like how he was a recycling guy, in St. Louis with no tire tread, sliding up and down with ice and snow, collecting stuff to recycle, but then didn't have anywhere for it to go or didn't know how it's properly being recycled. To even hearing how he's talking about collaboration is needed from all business sectors to really drive around sustainability, recyclability. He has a master's of science in packaging value chain. So he went back to school to study this and see how to implement it into the everyday work and efforts at his company. And also when he goes to talk about this at various trade shows. So, guys, he is very passionate about this. And that's why I'm like, you need to connect with him, follow his journey, and listen to his podcast because he talks about all these things that he just hinted at. And this is almost like a mini masterclass that he's given us too around the power of collaboration, especially around sustainability. So I just had to say that because Brandon is the truth out here when it comes to and value chain and the importance of it as well. Excuse me. And so I want to ask you, Brandon, like with you always being in the packaging industry and your evolution in the space as well, and seeing the paradigm shift that we're seeing around sustainability, recyclability, and things of that sort, and the need for collaboration. How are you, as the CEO of PPC, implementing these things and also cascading it to your team to be very intentional about how to drive sustainability for the clients you work with?
yeah, no, and thank you for that. I just want to put there are so many really smart and amazing people in this space, and I always like to caveat everything I kind of say is I am never done learning,
Mm-hmm.
and things are shifting and changing so quickly that I'm sure some of the things I'm saying today aren't accurate anymore, or that there needs more context. And I love having that conversation with people because it just leads to more kind of insight. But I think for us at PPC and our manufacturing partners, because the way that we work is basically brands come to us with their packaging problems, and then
Mm-hmm.
our team basically of packaging experts and engineers and designers and project managers and all these things like really get to know what the problems are, and then we go to our network of suppliers and put together all of the solutions. We
Mm-hmm.
do it for really large accounts and companies, mostly in the CPG space. We also help medium-sized companies, and then sometimes we'll help kind of that smaller brand. But typically, we're kind of in that like phase two of a brand's growth, where they've kind of got a good base and their brand's growing, and they need customized packaging in primary, rigid, or secondary. What I
Mhm.
love about that space is one, there's typically a desire across the board to be more sustainable. There's a lot of value that we can bring because, as you know, the packaging world is kind of filled with
Yeah.
potholes and speed bumps and
Yep.
down trees just because the winds are horrible out here in California. Like, and so having people that have been through the journey a lot, they can kind of navigate around those and then provide other insights and ways to improve the packaging supply chain for businesses is just something we really enjoy doing and that I think we're pretty good at. And the other part to that is that the impact that we have, like what I tell my team is like those ripples are really, really significant and big.
Hmm.
So if we can help a brand move all of their packaging from virgin plastic into 50% PCR, we've just and they're doing, a few million units a year, the average the added weight and savings and benefit to the environment is really significant. Like it's so much greater than just one individual recycling something in the right way, right? Like
Yeah.
those ripples are really big. And then it's not just this order, like it's everything in that year. And then that brand can inspire other brands to improve and grow. And so that that knowledge or that realization for our team became kind of infectious, and we were like, let's just keep pushing and seeing what more can we do, like how more honest and transparent, and what new materials, and how can we help the manufacturers out there find a source of really high quality white polypropylene PCR to improve the
Hmm.
clarity of their white PCR components. So it just became this like kind of part where we just kind of kept adding people into the solution, and the solution for our clients just kept getting better and better. And then we were able to find other partners in sectors that I hadn't even thought about. So Credo Beauty
Hmm.
contacted us because they kind of had heard that the conversations we were having with people were really honest and almost like ripping kind of the veil of secrecy off of like what's
Yeah.
actually happening. Like, no, 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 you shouldn't call that recyclable because it's not ever going to get recycled. Like you should call it something else. You should say it's. And in those cases, we actually have really specific guidance for different types of packaging that brands should be communicating to clients to in order to one, be more clear and honest about what they should do with the packaging, but two, ESG and EPR regulations are changing very quickly. And brands right now are getting in trouble for calling things recyclable or
Hmm.
sustainable or whatever or biodegradable when they're not. And
Yeah.
so we need to be really careful in the industry about how we're talking about these things. But Credo was creating the sustainable packaging guidelines. Like they were creating a standard for their
Yeah.
brands. And so they invited me to come on as their sustainable packaging expert to basically help create these guidelines and then
Yeah.
advise the Credo brands on how they could accomplish the goals and standards that were being set. And that was just an incredible partnership, and it helped revolutionize, I think, a lot in the beauty personal care space, because now you see really similar or different versions of standards being created with other retailers or even
Yeah.
brands themselves being like, this is what matters to us and this is what's going to drive the decisions that we make about our packaging.
Absolutely. And, Credo Beauty has always been one of those leading governing bodies. That's what I like to call them,
Yeah.
in reference, especially in the beauty industry, amongst like what is the standard. And to your point, a lot of retailers are now implementing their standards of sustainability and what that looks like for products, the ingredient side, but also for packaging. And even when I work with my clients, they're like, oh, I want to go into Target and Sephora. Okay, that's great. But what are your core missions and what does sustainability mean to you and your brand first? Because if your brand has a different definition or does not align with retailers, it may not be a good fit, but that also determines the partners we bring on to work with. So if that will be PPC or any other distributor or manufacturer, etc., we need to make sure all of those things are synchronized for it to have everybody at the table to help with making sure things are sustainable and we're not just greenwashing or having fluff, out there in the market and you really can't recycle from an end user standpoint. So I think it's very commendable, with you as the CEO of the company and you're being having those transparent conversations with your team. They're seeing it in action, they're implementing those things and having the conversation with your manufacturers and partners. Because, like you said, everybody needs to be at the table. And it's all about collaboration at the end of the day, and also seeing what technology is being incorporated, from the materials to actual technology to help with efficiency, productivity, etc., which we're going to talk about. And that's part of why you have the new podcast name, Packology. So I think it's, going back to my point, it's very commendable and it's a true leader to really lead the team to really be intentional about what sustainability means in the various facets, and also how that ripple, has that ripple effect amongst your partners, your manufacturers, to even the end users at the end of the day, because it's much needed. And there's a lot of greenwashing out here that needs to stop. I'm just gonna put it like that.
Thank you. Yeah, and we, you brought up technology, and it's really interesting because I think where sustainability as a topic has been really kind of trendy, and it's been really practical too. I mean, there's been like really good
Mm-hmm.
progress made. The
Yeah.
next step is like, how do we track it, measure it, you know,
Yeah.
reward progress? How do we punish those that are maybe, being dishonest or lying or making bad decisions? And, technology, whether it's blockchain or scannable, track and trace, AI, robotics being used on, different sorting, processes. There's a lot that's going to basically come into the whole packaging supply chain, especially end
Mm-hmm.
of life scenarios, and it's going to have a significant impact on everyone. And so
Absolutely.
that's an area that I really enjoy, and yeah, that's why we switched the podcast name from the Packaging Brothers to Packology.
I love it. And I talked with Maurizio Carano and John Dwyer on a prior episode talking about connected packaging. And we talked about track and trace, for packaging and really like the food and beverage space, but also pharma and how it's starting to roll out to other industries. So to your point, technology, especially in the packaging industry, is much needed. And it's going to be part of our everyday world around packaging. And so, with you now having the rebranded podcast, Packology, where it's a fusion of packaging and technology, and it's really revolutionizing the way packaging is designed, sourced, procured, and recycled. What other packaging technologies outside of blockchain, track and trace are you seeing when you speak with other powerhouses on your podcast? And how is that starting to roll out across a lot of different industries?
So, I mean, from a manufacturing standpoint, I think that's going to be the one that's going to be probably the slowest to change, just because it requires the most amount of investment
Mm-hmm.
and shift. So, scannable technologies that are being utilized in robotics on the recycling floor, I think, is really interesting. You
Mm-hmm.
have basically these cameras that sit above, and as the AI kind of gets better, or not even AI, but just as the technology gets better in identifying different materials, then the robotics and the sorting kind of process can be better. So
Yeah.
so much of what kind of the complexity in the recycling stream in the US is that everything goes into one bin. So everything that's
Mm.
recyclable goes into that blue bin, it goes out to the curb, gets picked up, and then it
Yep.
goes to the recycling facility to be sorted. That sorting process, it's really different. Like in Europe, you basically, the public, like, we take their recycling to a place where there's multiple bins, kind of like it was when I was in college. And then
Yeah.
everyone would basically put their recycling in the individual bins. And the reason they do that is because it's so much more efficient in creating better outputs.
Yeah.
And so I really like kind of the technology around that collection and sorting. It'll be interesting to see how that kind of maybe shifts the way that we're collecting it eventually, if Americans can get to the point where we go to one place and drop everything
Yeah.
off. I don't know. Changing human behavior is
I'm gonna say,
is tough.
I'm gonna be honest, we're a little lazy, so it's gonna be a challenge for that one. But
Yeah,
we're staying optimistic.
we're staying optimistic. And again, like, maybe technology, robotics, collection, sorting can get better. But one of the really interesting things, and I want to hit on this, is glass is often kind of talked about as being infinitely recyclable and one of the more sustainable materials. And in many ways, it is. Like, it's made of sand and limestone and soda ash, and so when it does break down in the environment, it doesn't create this kind of same type of pollution as like microplastics does. But when
Mm-hmm.
it breaks in that big recycling truck, when it gets dumped in, all of those shards of glass end up in the package, in the other types of packaging formats. It gets embedded in the corrugate recyclers. It gets trapped in a plastic bottle. And so when those things are being sorted at the facility, those shards of glass are contaminants. and they
Mm-hmm.
cause problems as it's being processed. So glass is one of those things where if I can tell anyone to do anything with their single kind of collection recycling source, take all your glass, put it in another bin, and then find a place to recycle where just glass is collected. It makes the recycling of all those other materials, the plastic and the paper and the cardboard, just much easier for the recycling streams.
Oh, so y'all hear Brandon Frank, right? Okay, CEO of PPC. He just told you one thing you can do right now to have a more positive impact with recycling. Okay, so I'm gonna do the same thing too. So this is an action item for all of us. Put our glass in a separate container and find somewhere to actually go and recycle the glass. So I think that's a value point because like I said, here in Atlanta, we just put everything in one. And then when you go to look at these sorting facilities, like in my municipality, in Cobb County, yeah, it all just goes into one bin. Then they try to sort it. Then the workers are like, it all goes to the landfill because we don't have enough workers or we don't have the technology incorporated on the lines to help with sorting and stuff like that. So it all just goes to the trash. I'm like, but I've been recycling. Yeah, we don't. And so it just becomes a ripple effect, like you
Yeah.
mentioned earlier. So,
Yeah.
but we're all going to do this one action item. I think we all can do that and hold each other accountable to start putting our glass in a separate container and go from there. So y'all heard Brandon Frank talk about it right here on the Product Packaging Powerhouse, and we're gonna hold y'all accountable and hold me accountable too, as well. And I have to make sure I hold my husband accountable because that's a whole nother topic we'll
I
talk
know.
about later.
It's hard. It's hard, and it could feel like such a huge issue and problem where,
Yeah.
my individual contribution isn't going to make a difference, but it's in the aggregate. All of us working together and doing just the little things that we can add up to be a pretty big thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. So you mentioned about regulations, and I'm big about compliance. You're big about compliance. And we also see how the regulations are constantly changing with packaging EPR, ESG, and more to come. And so, from your experience, what have been some regulatory challenges when we're considering smart materials or changing materials or incorporating technology into our packaging?
I mean, it's again, it's a big question because every different type of packaging has kind of its own kind of challenges. But I would say like one of the areas where it's going to be really hard to navigate this channel is that and changes is that every state, especially here in California with SB 54, like there's new standards being implemented in each state, and as a
Yeah.
packaging supplier and brand to have kind of different rules across the country makes it really complicated. And so
Mm-hmm.
my advice to brands is basically go with the state that is the most strict, which right now it's California or
California.
Washington,
Mm-hmm.
and go according to those rules and those guidance because I don't think it's going to go the other way, right? And it's just more states are going to get on board with the kind of the regulations and rules that are happening. And then I'll also say that I don't think that the government's necessarily involvement in the type of change that's happening right now is necessarily the most productive.
Mm-hmm.
Often when there's kind of standards or legislations that are kind of put in, like for example, using, let's just say, like mandatory that any single serve plastics are made with 100% recycled content. Well, there's a whole issue with the supply chain of really good recycled content, food grade, right?
Yeah.
Especially if people are
Yeah.
putting in their mouths. So like, where does that material come from? It's like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
well, we need more machines, we need more processes. Well, that's a lot of investment that needs to happen in order to produce that material. And then all of a sudden, well, it's like, well, now we're going to use wood forks, or we're going to use paper straws, we're going to use these
Yeah.
other things. Well, the carbon impact on those is greater than the single use plastic items. And so if the goal is to reduce carbon emissions in California, then then the rules aren't.
Yeah.
So it becomes really kind of complicated, right? As different
Mm-hmm.
states are coming up with different laws and regulations. So I'm hopeful that one of the pieces of technology that is going to happen is going to make it very easy for us to do these kind of comparisons, these life cycle analysis comparisons for different types of packaging types, so
Mm-hmm.
that when we draft new laws and or new standards or new whatever, that they're really, based on, like, they're educated and
Yeah.
they're kind of fully vetted out instead of just kind of good talking points, because it
Mm-hmm.
is because it is, complex. And then I think on the other side too, what makes the technology really interesting is that it can kind of connect all the members of the value chain, and the ability for a brand to manufacture a glass bottle and put a track and trace technology or even just a basic QR code to where they know that that item has been kind of tokenized, right? Like they're like that's an individual
Mm-hmm.
item that's going through the world, right? It was
Mm-hmm.
manufactured here, it was sold here, it was bought by someone in this area, and was it recycled? Like, did it make
Yeah.
it through all the way? And then that recycled content, where was it recycled and what did it turn into later down the road? That becomes more complicated because the scannable technologies don't survive the recycling process. But for and then if that if that if the brand has kind of taken responsibility for saying, okay, this type of packaging should be recycled in this way, and
Mm-hmm.
it's educating the customer about, hey, you should recycle it in this way, and when you do, scan it, and we'll reward you with
Mm-hmm.
a cryptocurrency or a special store credit or a special like
Yeah.
gift or whatever. Now all of a sudden technology is kind of connecting and being used throughout the packaging value chain, and it's leading to better results in terms of sustainability.
Absolutely. Oh, and it's like a two for one because as a consumer, like I love shoes and jewelry. I'm not gonna tell myself or how much I'm investing into that. So that's a whole nother topic. But there's packages coming in daily for some of those elements and even lip gloss, like more Fenty Beauty lip gloss that like just came in today. But nevertheless, to your point, I think if there was some type of incentive, like you said, like cryptocurrency, because we see the way the world is shifting, in reference of technology and currency and stuff like that would be something of greater value because I'm already investing into cryptocurrency and things of that sort. That is a great incentive for me to help, as well as, helping with recyclability and being part of the full value chain and thinking about circularity, and having more of a positive impact, on the circular economy. So I think that's a very valid point, but we need all the members to be part of the table, like you mentioned, to really think about the life cycle analysis and having the technology to really track it and incorporate and track and trace or any other type of technology to be part of it, and having all the members of the value chain be part of that for a more collaborative approach so we can make an impact together, because it's a lot of complexity, and it's not something that you can tackle on your own as Brandon Frank or me just putting in glass containers in separate recycling, in separate bins and such, and other consumers. Like that makes a great impact, but there's a lot more we need to do. And I feel like we should be leading better than what we are. We're still in
Yeah.
this infancy stage, but we're not like the EU, where it's very regimented and you know exactly what you're supposed to do. But I'm appreciative of the strides we have accomplished, but there's still so much more to go, And I think we all can agree that we're eating the elephant one bite at a time, but around regulations, it's so much changing. But I like the position of how you tell your brands to look at the more stringent or more stricter states like California, Washington, Oregon, things of that sort, and implement some of those things into the everyday practices. Don't follow Georgia, okay? Y'all, don't follow Georgia because you're going to be upside down.
But it's not like Georgia's fault, or it's just like it's there's in some areas of the country, like the ability to recycle the amount of goods is actually, it can actually be worse for the environment than just landfilling it.
That's true.
Like if there are only recycle facilities for certain kinds in certain areas, then the carbon emissions of just transporting the material from
Would
one
be
area to
higher.
another, gets rid of any environmental benefit that it would actually recycle it.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot to it. But I find solace, or I find some comfort in doing just those little decisions. One other little decision that we talk about at home is that when we're shopping for goods, whether it's online or in a store, are we buying packaging that has recycled content in it? When we go
Mm-hmm.
get our shampoos, like are we able to identify which ones are choosing packaging that's maybe has been lightweighted or is using recycled content? Or home cleaners, I mean, there's a lot now, you can actually see them, but if you go in the Target aisle, look for the
Yeah.
plastic that looks a little gray or a little like dirty, and
Yeah.
that's recycled plastic. And so that is probably the most, like, probably the best way to support like the
Mm-hmm.
recyclability and the recycling of items is to buy items that have are coming from recycled goods, because that creates kind of this pull mechanism, right? Like the more consumers
Yeah.
buy those products, the demand goes up. And so the supply has to, respond and meet with it too.
That's true. And I think that's a really great practice, especially with your little ones, because you have three little ones, right?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's teaching them how to think about, making a positive impact on, on the planet and regeneration, then down to sustainability and investing in brands that are paying for recycled materials and packaging and such. So I think that's beautiful how it's your own circular economy of teaching your little, from you, your wife, and your little ones, to implement those practices. So that's something I'm gonna incorporate since I'm expecting my first one,
There you go.
to incorporate that too. So I think that's cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna be coming up on our couple last questions. And so, since you've seen packaging technology evolve, being in the packaging industry for decades now, Brandon is young. He stays active and fit and stuff like that, but he's been in this space for decades. Okay, so put some respect on his name and his credentials. So I would love for you to share, a case study either from your company or what you possibly have read where packaging technology has significantly reduced cost and help boost operational efficiency.
Yeah, no, I love this one example because it's so Niagara Water is located here in Southern California, and a friend there, Mark, we I kind of talked about this, but it just shows the power of like packaging because there's so many items that are processed. But I'm gonna butcher the percentages here, but they were able to lightweight their water bottles by like, I don't say it was like 3% or something. So lightweighting is where you just reduce the amount of plastic that is used in an item. By them doing this small kind of engineering of their packaging, they were able
Hmm.
to save, I think it was like 50, 500, some astronomical tonnage of
Mm,
plastic being used. And
wow.
it was fascinating. Like, so to me, one of the really cool case studies or parts of packaging is just the scale at which things are manufactured and
Hmm.
how a little adjustment, a little shift at the business level can cause just a huge amount of impact throughout,
Yeah.
the whole thing. So for me, I've always been kind of like impact driven and kind of value and purpose driven. And so to me, for the maybe young students or packaging people that are kind of listening to this, if you choose to go into an industry where you can make little impact that has, or a small decision that can have huge impact, packaging is one of those industries.
Yeah. I love that. And it's something that with one of my other powerhouses, Dustin Smith. Do you know Dustin?
No.
Okay, I need to make an introduction. So Dustin Smith is the CEO of Boltsmith Packaging Consultants, and he talks about impact and using that to help drive decision making. So he had a similar example to the Niagara water that you're mentioning with lightweighting some of the packaging, and it actually was able to help reduce X percentage of plastic being used on the back end. So there's a lot of synergy, and as part of that, when he goes to other companies, he talks about how he uses that case study as an example to help with driving decision making and looking at what you talked about earlier, life cycle analysis, collaboration with team members in the value chain. So it can be very collaborative and also knowing the impact that it makes from the end consumer all the way to manufacturing. So I love that example. And guys, I'm going to try to find the case study that Brandon talked about with Niagara Water as well to include in the show notes because I do believe it's helpful, like Brandon's mentioned and like I share, we always stay a student because things are rapidly changing. And there's something that we all can learn from case studies, white papers. I'm looking at them myself quite a bit. So once I find it, I will include in the show notes. If I don't find it, reach out to Brandon because I'm sure he
I'll
would
find
love to
it.
have a
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
conversation about
yeah,
it.
yeah. Yeah, I'll share it.
So awesome. So looking into the future, you talked about packaging technology and where we're currently at now. But what are some cutting edge technologies you believe will revolutionize packaging development?
Well, I'm really excited about one, and it's going to sound really kind of basic, but there are some packaging types and formats that are impossible to recycle.
Okay.
And there's a lot of plastic that is used in those items. And when we figure out how to turn those into like able to be recycled, so creating in like a monomaterial way, then
Yeah.
all of a sudden it opens the door for potential collection in the future.
Okay.
So the one that I'm really excited about now, and it's been around for a little bit, but I'm finally happy with like the quality of the components that are being made now, which is why I'm now excited about it,
Okay.
are monomaterial all plastic pumps. So think
Hmm.
about your lotion pumps, treatment pumps, anything that's kind of, shampoo, conditioner bottles, lotions, all of those have historically been used with a metal spring. And that
Hmm.
metal spring and lots of different types of plastics. So that polypropylene and polyethylene and different materials in there.
Yeah.
Well, a few years ago, it was kind of developed that, and this has been around for a while, but there was kind of, instead of using a metal spring, to use a plastic spring. So instead of it
Hmm.
being, unable to be recycled in any real format, now you could potentially do it. But the challenge was creating a monomaterial pump. So you could go from metal spring pump to all plastic pump to now monomaterial pumps. And when we say monomaterial in the packaging space, it usually means that it's all of one material over 95, 96%. So there's always a little bit that's not 100% of the material in these types of like packaging. But as long as you're over 95, 96%, then it can be deemed as like having value in the recycling process.
Okay.
So my hope, if I could like wave a magic wand, is that basically 2025 is the year where the kind of mass adoption or movement from metal springs to monomaterial pumps starts to happen.
Mhm.
And that 5, 10 years from now, that's all that'll really exist. And so that any pump that's manufactured in the world will have an avenue to be collected and processed and recycled.
Okay. I love that. And I remember a couple years ago, I saw there was a call for somebody, for different consumers and stuff, to test out a bottle. It was from Aptar with their first monomaterial pump
Yep.
for a cranberry enzyme mask. I remember that because I created a cranberry enzyme mask for one of my other clients. And so, to your point, they tested it and stuff like that, and it was monomaterial, but it still had some work to be done with the evacuation of the formulas and things of that sort. And this was like about 5 or 6 years ago. So, to your point, it has been around for a while, but the evolution of the monomaterial, I think, is definitely getting greater. And I didn't realize that monomaterial needs to be at 95 to 96%. I thought it was actually less than that. So I learned something new and something for me to research
Yeah,
as well.
and I throw that out there. I've heard it's 95%. I always say it's 96% just to like keep things going in a higher direction, but different
Hmm.
areas have different requirements for the percentage. So you might not be wrong, but yeah, we might just be coming at it from a different point.
No,
The
but
other
it was also a couple of years ago. So,
yeah,
so we both are going to go and research this,
yeah,
because
always.
I think
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
we're
It could
always
be
eager.
like I need like a breaking news place for packaging where I can just go there and see like the different stuff that's coming up.
I
But
know, right?
one of the other really cool kind of advancements that needs to happen in packaging in order for it to be adopted is the ability to make things cost effectively. So there
Yeah.
have been monomaterial pump options for a long time, but it wasn't cost efficient for mass adoption. And so the
Hmm.
technologies of making the components, making the spring, like at scale, assembly,
Yeah.
packing, testing the output, like how is it going to dispense the product? How durable is it? Like, are we
Hmm.
sure that this spring is going to last through that entire big 24-ounce like shampoo bottle, especially when
Yeah.
it's a really thick conditioner? Like, how is that really going to push the product out? So there's all of these things that need to happen as it matures. And I love that word, evolve or mature. Like
Yeah.
that's what needs to happen in kind of all technologies. But so anyways, it's finally gotten to the point where I'm excited about it. And we have four main manufacturers of these all plastic pumps, depending on the different styles or things that are used. So really any brand in the US that's interested in doing this, yeah, I'm excited to see what the future is going to hold. And a lot of these pumps are already in the market in other markets. So they're being sold in Europe or in the Middle East,
Mm.
and the success of the commercialization has been there, which I think is what a
Okay.
lot of brands were waiting for. It was like,
Yeah.
are we sure it's going to be successful in the market? Like all that stuff. So
Absolutely. And guys, Brandon and his company PPC have some phenomenal case studies. I've worked alongside of him and his team, and they are very diligent and transparent, on capabilities, the manufacturers, and also now having these monomaterial pumps, that he's so excited about. So please contact him and his company because they have a lot of experience. They're big into value chain. I mean, he went back to school to go get a master's in the industry. Like that goes to show you that he loves this so much, but also to have added value and benefits to the clients that he works with in various industries. So all of their company information and his also LinkedIn information will be down in the show notes. And if you're watching our video formats on YouTube and other platforms, please make sure you click on the link and connect with Brandon through LinkedIn and his company as well, because they will make sure to get you all the way together and you learn something from them every single time you speak with them. So I cannot wait to hear and see what products come to fruition working with PPC and seeing some of the monomaterial pumps that are coming to market that you'll get from Brandon and his team. So, Brandon, last question before we get into our power round. You
Okay,
ready for this one?
I'm ready.
Okay. So, since you've been in the packaging industry for decades, okay, you've been operating your family business. And so you understand the power of entrepreneurship and being a business owner. What has been one of the most rewarding moments? And what has been one of the most challenging moments operating the company?
Ooh. So I think so. The most challenging time was when, so we had a rule in the family business where it wasn't really said. I mean, it kind of was, but this idea that you had to kind of go out on your own first and kind of learn
Mm,
lessons on someone else's dime. It's not a huge business. Like I like to say we're small and mighty, but that my grandparents kind of understood that it was really important to go out and learn before you kind of came in and had a big leadership role within the company. And so
mm.
after graduating, I went out and did other things. I was in real estate, I was in retail, I directed an all boys summer camp out in Maine for a few
Wow.
years. Yeah. And so I think a part of it was like I kind of went out and did these different things. I was always connected to the packaging industry and would always work with the company, but it wasn't kind of the primary focus the whole time. But in those experiences, I was able to learn kind of other aspects of the packaging world. The way that
Mm,
retailers think, the way that brands think, the way that you kind of everything kind of functions in like an economy. And so to me, it gave me a more kind of well-rounded experience base to be able to bring back to the packaging to our family business. But when I came back to the business was being kind of led and run, and the culture had gone kind of far away from where the family really wanted it to be.
mm,
And so it was really challenging to kind of come in and right the ship. Basically, in the first few months of me coming back and taking over as president, like almost half of the people had to go.
oh, wow.
And so I had to basically come in and say, hey, like this is what we're going to be doing going forward. We need to improve the value that we bring our clients. We have to be true to who we are. We have to bring more honesty to the conversation and all these different things. So that was a huge risk for me and for kind of my family to put a lot of faith in. So it
Yeah.
was it was difficult few years and couple years to be able to make that transition because all of the good was still there. It was
Hmm.
just like I don't know. I kind of like compared it to this really beautiful sailboat, like this big ship, beautiful sails and all that stuff. But the this there was a bunch of barnacles that had attached to the hull of the ship that were preventing it from
Mm,
really like moving forward. And so when I came on, I recognized the need from past experiences to be able to have the culture be really clear,
mm,
values based, consistent, and communicated and lived throughout the organization. So basically, I just scraped off a bunch of those barnacles and so that was a really challenging time. I would say the most rewarding part was kind of fast forward 6 years later, where I was able to really kind of transition the company, and the company was once again very, very healthy, and was able to kind of allow my parents to kind of move on and from the business, from the day-to-day operations of the business. And it turns out that that kind of allowed my parents to spend a lot of time together in the last year of my dad's life. And so I look back on that as obviously missing my dad a lot. He was a huge part of my life. He was an absolute legend. But to be able to come back to the family business and kind of have that work out the way that it did, I think will be the most rewarding kind of professional thing I've ever
yeah.
done. Yeah.
I think that's beautiful. And that's such a great way to pay homage to your dad, because he was very impactful, in the industry. Because when I tell people Brandon Frank, they're like, oh, that's such and such son. And you'd be like, yeah, so even like with Jane Chase, I was talking with her. She's executive director at IOPP.
Mm.
And she was like, I didn't know Brandon took over the business. So I think to your point and what I mentioned earlier, display of good leadership, and also being value driven and also having it be radiated or ripple effect throughout your team is beautiful, for your parents to enjoy those last moments with your dad. So that's beautiful. And I could tear up. Okay. But I'm a
I'm trying to
too,
hold it back
too.
too. It's still, yeah,
Okay.
it's
Well,
still
we,
hard.
we can we can shed a tear, but it's always going to be a void. And
Yeah,
you're just learning how to live around that void, but all the efforts and the hard work that you're doing to still continue the legacy is still there and it shows. So
yeah,
continue to do what you do along with your brother Nolan as well, and always thinking about y'all in
yeah.
in this transition
Thank you,
too.
thank you, thank you, Megan.
Of course, of course. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you've been rocking with us, we get into our infamous power round. And if you're new here, we go into a power round with our guests.
I feel like I
And
should,
so
I
this is,
feel like I should
yeah, go ahead
stretch
and
a little
stretch.
bit. Yeah, I got to get
There you,
ready for this thing.
there you go. There you go. So, our power round is 90 seconds power round with our esteemed powerhouse asking about some of their fun, fast facts that they shared with us. And so, we're going to put Brennan on the spot, but I think he could do this in 90 seconds. And so, just to give you context of some of the fun facts that Brandon shared with us, is he once rode his bike 201 miles in a day. He also played college soccer, where he set the school record for most career assists. So he's not Lance Armstrong, but he's close enough, 101 miles in a day. But we're going to put 90 seconds on the clock and we're going to ask some questions to Brandon around those fun facts he shared with us. So, Brandon, I have 90 seconds on the clock. So, you ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, let's go ahead and get into it. So, if you are a professional soccer player playing in the FIFA World Cup and you could curate your own team, name the top key players that will be on the field with you, male or female.
Ooh, okay. I'm gonna go with Stevie G. Steven. I'm a Liverpool supporter, so Stevie G would be running the midfield. I would put up top. Let's just put just because Mo Salah is crushing it. I put him up top with Luis
Okay.
Diaz. Let's just throw in Dennis Bergkamp up there, and then in the
Okay.
back I would have Virgil Van Dijk in the middle, and then I don't know if you guys remember Stom, but he was like this amazing back that would play in the center back, and then goalkeeper Allison. He's still the greatest goalkeeper, I think, in the world. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay.
Okay, cool.
I love it. So, during your 201-mile bike ride from Santa Barbara to St. Louis, what were some key lessons you learned during your journey?
Yeah, so the route was from San Luis Obispo down to LA, and it was actually supposed to be 300 miles,
Okay.
but we only made it 201, and it was at 10:30 at night at an In-N-Out, 10 o'clock at night at an In-N-Out where I decided I had had enough. And that was the lesson that I learned was
Okay.
that it was amazing to shoot for 300 miles, knowing that it was going to be incredibly difficult, but also having the wisdom to say this is not going to be a productive time. We need to pull the plug. And so
Okay.
sometimes there's a moment where you have to quit, and I hate admitting that because there's a competitive core in me that is really really hard, but that was the lesson learned.
Oh, I think that's something we all can apply. So we're going to keep going because I want to get into these other fun facts. We're at time, but I want to keep asking you. So we're going to still keep it rapid speed. So, what are some of your favorite snacks and drinks for long bike rides that have sustainable packaging?
So I actually got into like I'll do the goos and the bars, but the cool part was I started making my own goos and my own bars. And so
Oh,
instead of
wow.
using packaging, it was just kind of like I would just take it with me. And so
Okay.
that's the answer.
Okay. I like it. So, what are your top three songs you keep on repeat for long work days and or bike rides?
So for me, I for those specific things, I like just background noise. And so for
Okay.
me, it ends up being jazz. Jazz just kind of
Ooh.
plays in the background and I just kind of pedal away or work away. And that's been my jam since gosh, college.
Okay. What type of jazz? You like classical jazz or what type of
Yeah,
jazz?
it's funny because I used to be like kind of have specific artists or things that I would like listen to, but now it's just been kind of like Pandora or Spotify, like just kind of
Okay.
channel where it just kind of hops around and plays. So often I don't even know who the artists are,
Okay.
but I can recognize the song when I
When
hear
you
it.
hear it.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. That's on my rotation and playlist too. I love good classical jazz in the morning.
Yeah.
Okay. And then packaging, technology, and sustainability are essential because fill in the blank.
Because boy, it's a big question. Because the environment that we give our children is going to be crucial for their enjoyment of this planet and their life.
Okay. And you're representing that with every time you go to that Target run and you're having the whole family go and look at which products and packaging you can actually support the brands with that may look a little quote unquote dirty. You're already doing that. So I think that to that point, you're already doing it. So it can be a positive impact for our little ones.
I like that.
So
I like that.
I love that. So, ladies and gentlemen, we had powerhouse guest Brandon Frank, CEO of Pacific Packaging Components, here with us today, sharing his insights and thoughts and also case studies around packaging, technology, and sustainability. At the end of the day, we need collaboration for all members that are part of our value chain to make sure that we're having a positive ripple effect upon our industry so we're not misleading with our communications or our efforts. But one action item that he told us all to do today, which is when we do recycle, put the glass in a separate container. So we're going to hold you all accountable to make sure you're implementing that as well. And so, Brandon, as we conclude for today, let everybody know how they can get in contact with you.
Yeah, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn or you can send me an email, which will be in the show notes, I'm sure. But it's Brandon@ppcpackaging.com.
Yes. And guys, just scroll down to the show notes, his LinkedIn information, company information, his bike company. We did not even get into his bike company today and the sustainable efforts that they're doing. All that information will be down linked in the show notes for you all. So please get engaged with Brandon and see how he can help support you all with your monomaterial pumps in the days ahead. So, guys, thank you so much for tuning in to today's segment right here on the Product and Packaging Powerhouse. You know, we always love some love. So make sure you give us a 5-star rating on your favorite platform. Connect with our powerhouse guests and share this with your network because, as I say, our network is based upon our network. So, guys, thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next segment. Bye.